Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our next Living Financially Smarter talk. Today's topic is Keren Hishtalmut, which we'll explain. I'm Rivka Leibowitz, founder of Living Financially Smarter and financial planner and consultant. And I have with me Danny Newman. Danny.
Hi, Rivka. Hi, everyone. So I guess we go straight in, explain, well, for those who haven't seen the previous one or haven't seen us on the Facebook group. So I kind of assist Rivka and Benjamin Radomski where we administer the group, try to moderate it as best as we can. And hopefully this will be another vehicle and a tool where we can help people understand another product that often comes up with questions in the group. And hopefully we'll be able to assist people with questions afterwards as well.
I really like this product. I'll just start with that. This is a financially smarter product. It got me really excited to see so many people wanting to sign up to listen to this live because a Keren Hishtalmut is a financially smarter product. It's a great way to save. So Danny, start with what is a Keren Hishtalmut? Explain it for the people listening who are maybe new Olim or just don't know what it is. They've heard the word thrown around because many people have, but they don't actually know what it is.
Okay, so I'm just going to share screen because like last time with the pensions, I've got a presentation. So bear with me 1 second for the technicalities. And okay, so what is a Keren Hishtalmut? So over the next few slides, obviously Rivka, you can add your comments as well. But firstly, what is a Keren Hishtalmut? So first and foremost, it is pretty much the only short-term savings vehicle in Israel that is exempt from taxation. When I say it's a tax-free savings plan, in essence means that unlike other investment vehicles, if let's say you put money in a bank and earn 10 shekel interest on, let's say, 1,000 shekel, then you won't see that 10 shekel when you want to draw it out. There is 25% tax on the profits, known as capital gains tax. So you would only see 7.5 shekel of that 10 shekel profit. This is a vehicle whereby once the plan, in most instances, has been for more than 6 years, there is no longer any taxation on any of the profits. So here's a little bit an explanation on that. Now, there can be scenarios whereby one can take it beforehand. If someone, let's say, is already over the age of 60 and has a fund for, let's say, for 3 years, and there are other instances as well where you may be able to take it, but in most instances, it's 6 years after that. So the question that people always ask, because obviously a lot of people want to open up this amazing product and say, well, can I open one up? So the question is, unfortunately, not everyone can open up a Keren Hishtalmut. So who can? There are in essence 3 types of people. The first is someone who's a regular salaried or a worker. So called a sachir or schira in Hebrew. And it is not an obligatory benefit that the employer has to provide. They have to provide pensions. However, a Keren Hishtalmut is an additional perk, an additional benefit. So that's the first group of people who can have a Keren Hishtalmut, someone who is an employee and their employer is offering it as part of their social benefit package. The second person is pretty much similar to a sachir or schira, but this is known as a sachir bal shlita or schira balat shlita, someone who owns their own company and they are in essence paying themselves through their company and they're earning like a regular employee with a tlush maskoret, with a pay slip. The third group of people is someone who's an atzmai or an atzmait, someone who is a freelancer, self-employed, and I've put in the 2 main terms here, osek patur, osek mosher. These are terms that get thrown around, and osek patur is usually someone who's earning up to a, let's say, for simplicity of figures, let's say up to about 100,000 shekel, and osek mosher is usually someone who's earning more than that, or can be someone who's earning less than that, but is in an industry where they have to provide receipts or tax receipts, so they officially called an osek mosher. Someone has a tick with Mas Haknasa, a file with the tax authorities that they are considered an atzmai, then they too have the ability to open up a Keren Hishtalmut. Not going to go too much into this, but this question came up when we, Rivka, when you put out on the group that we're going to be speaking about Keren Hishtalmut, a few people already asked some questions. So I'm mentioning US citizens here. Have to put a very, very strong disclaimer here. I'm a licensed insurance and pension professional here in Israel. I am not a licensed US tax professional. Neither is Rivka. Neither is Binyamin, who's an Israeli CPA who also runs the group with us. But there's a lot of questions that come up with regards to what's called a PFIC, passive foreign investment companies. And the US can, in some instances, potentially tax people who have mutual funds or the like here in Israel or other countries around the world. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not licensed to give this. There are divergence of opinions. So in essence, the only solution or the only answer for people who have this question, speak to your own US CPA, and they will be able to advise you based on your own specific individual way that how you report and what your overall portfolio is, whether or not it's something that's recommended. Usually the questions arise for atzmaim, for self-employed. Usually for schirim, it's very rarely an issue. But again, speak to your US CPA. So the question is, what is paid in? And I'm going to give you what's usually, there sometimes are slight differences, but the vast majority of people who are working as a salaried worker usually have 10% of their insured salary paid into a Keren Hishtalmut. So for example, if someone is earning 10,000 shekel a month as a gross salary, not including travel and various other additional costs which make up the salary. So if someone's earning a gross salary of 10,000 shekel, so 10% would mean 1,000 shekel each month could be going into a Keren Hishtalmut. How is that split? So it's split two ways. The employee, the worker, will pay 2.5%. In essence, it will be taken off their pay slip. And in a couple of slides' time, I will show an example of a pay slip where one can see how it actually looks and appears on the Tlush Maskoret. So the employee will, in essence, have 2.5% deducted from their pay, from their salary, and that will be paid on their behalf by the employer. The employer will contribute an additional 7.5% over and above the gross salary. So it's an additional payment.
I sometimes see this as almost free money. Like you're offered a salary, let's just say 10 for the sake of our example. And then if you're offered a Keren Hishtalmut, which is something that I'm just going to point out that some people can negotiate if it's not a given, with jobs, it can sometimes be negotiated. It's free money. Like this 750, on this 10,000 shekel salary is money that they weren't expecting, and the employer, shells out, goes straight into a savings for the employee, which is one of the many reasons we love this product so much.
That's definitely true. Like there are some employers who actually use it as an additional perk when someone's been working for a certain period of time. Just to show, well, you stay with us for a long time, we'll give you an additional benefit. So some employers may use it for that. And also, as you mentioned, a very good point, as far as a negotiating tool is concerned, the employer contribution into a Keren Hishtalmut is tax deductible for the employer. So it may cost them less. If someone's, let's say, earning 10,000 shekel or 15,000 shekel, and they're given a 1,000 shekel pay rise, they're not going to see the whole 1,000 shekel because of tax, pension contributions, and the like. But if instead they were to be given a Keren Hishtalmut, so they have 2.5% will come off their salary, but they're having an additional 7.5%, which was going straight into savings, and it's an excellent way of saving. We'll see how this vehicle, works, and with compound interest, which we'll look at a bit later. You're right, Rivka. It is something which can be used as a negotiating tool, and sometimes may be better in some instances if one doesn't need the extra cash, in their take home, to maybe negotiate a Keren Hishtalmut. Because once you've got the Keren Hishtalmut and then subsequent pay rises after that, you've already got the Keren Hishtalmut there. So that's a useful tool. Now, something I just wanted to add is there is an upper limit as far as tax benefits are concerned. The tax benefit is to a monthly salary of 15,712 shekel. So there may be people who are earning more than that. Some employers, let's say someone who's earning 20,000 shekel. So some employers may pay Keren Hishtalmut on the full 20,000 shekel. On the difference between 15,712 and 20,000 shekels, that's 4,288 shekel. On the contribution of that is a taxable benefit in kind. But it's still worthwhile because the employer is trebling what the employee is paying in. It's definitely worthwhile anyway. However, it is quite common for some employers to cap and manipulate the monthly salary. So if someone's earning 20,000, for example, they may say for Keren Hishtalmut, we're only going up until the upper tax limit for tax benefits. And that is a salary of 15,712, just a small technical point. But in essence, the majority of people will have 10% going in total, of which it's a 2.5%, 7.5% split. There are some differences in a few places, but that's the majority case. A question came up, I saw also on the group when we're going to preempt things. This came up last week. Someone asked, what about teachers? So with teachers, it's very, very interesting. There are different types of schools. Some are through the Misrad HaChinuch, some are private schools, and there are so many different types. So I'm not going to go too much into it. But this, I took a clip from Kol Zchut, a very good website in Hebrew. And so it is quite common that the percentage may be different. It might be 4.2% will be what is deducted, and 8.4% paid by the employer, by the school. So a total of 12.6%. However, it may not necessarily in all instances be available as cash. Quite often, teachers may go on a sabbatical. I mean, this is really one of the origins of Keren Hishtalmut. It's kind of an educational fund. It's something which people would take a year off. Obviously, we're in Shemitah year this year, so it's the 7th year, so quite topical to be speaking about it now. But it was a year that people would be able to take off to enhance, enrich themselves, and do courses, and then come back, with a broader knowledge, or to be able to enhance the overall educational system and their own personal learning as well. So that would often give them that ability to take that year off, but they wouldn't get it necessarily as cash like other people can do. But again, as it's put in bold, in certain instances, you may be able to take the money. So the recommendation is for teachers, because it's such a complex topic, and it differs maybe from school to school, and depending whether or not it's actually through Misrad HaChinuch or not. So I'll leave it there, but it can be slightly different for teachers, and they often will be through two specific funds, either Keren Hishtalmut Lemorim Ulegananot for teachers and for kindergarten teachers, or Lemorim Tichoniyim, Morim Seminarim Mefakrim. So it's the different types of funds out there. So, for those who are relevant, who have questions, be best to speak to your insurance advisor, or even to the HR in the school who helped set it up, who may be able to assist you understanding more what you specifically have. This is just a way of people very quickly on a pay slip where someone can seize it. So over here on the right-hand side will be the gross salary. So we're seeing in this example, someone is earning 12,000 shekel. On the left-hand side, we will see the deductions, and you'll have, income tax, Mas Achnasa, Bituach Leumi is national insurance, Mas Brit is the health tax, and then you have the employee pension and the Keren Hishtalmut contributions. So here we're talking about Keren Hishtalmut. So here usually it's 2.5%, and you see 2.5% of 12,000 shekel is 300 shekel. So this person's having 300 shekel deducted. You then have the next salary. So they take all the deductions, A minus B, and that's the take-home pay. On the right-hand side, we see what the employer's contributions are over and above the gross salary of 12,000 shekel in this example. So you've got the pension contributions here, but here is the Keren Hishtalmut next to the green arrow. And I said again, usually 7.5%, 900 shekel, and we see here's the salary of 12,000 shekel, what they're paying on. It's 7.5%. So it's 3 times the amount. So you take 2.5 to 7.5 is 3 times the amount. So it's 300 times 3 is 900. Add the two together, you've got 1,200 shekel, which is 10% of the base salary each month. And that is where someone can check on their pay slip where and how and if is what's been taken off. The next group of people
come up, Danny, if just pause a second, thank you. A question that came up on the group also is, let's say my employer doesn't offer a Keren Hishtalmut, and I want to deposit myself with their agreement, which has to come. It would still appear like this if the employer agrees. Do you want to just explain how that works? Not every employer needs to agree or will agree, but sometimes this does come up.
So yeah, very good question. We actually have a few clients ourselves who have this agreement as well. Obviously, primarily it's usually initiated by the employee, by the worker, and they will turn around to their employer and say, "Listen, I really want to save in this vehicle, and I appreciate you're not giving. Is there any way we can manipulate the salary so that I can get this savings tool?" Now, obviously, that's dependent on the employer. Some employers will say, "No, I don't even go into that minefield, because I'm setting a precedent, and then once it's there, other people are going to ask, and it's a real headache." So not everyone would agree to it. But if they are amenable to this, so in essence, they will manipulate. So they might reduce in this instance. So they say, "Okay, we're going to reduce the salary to, let's say, 11,100 shekel." I mean, it'll be slightly different because of the tax breaks on it as well, but they'll lower this, and then they will put in the figure here. So the employee is in essence paying for both of them, but the salary will have to be lowered to account for the employer's contribution. So there are employers who do agree to it. It's not. I wouldn't say it's overly common, but it definitely has happened, and we have a number of clients ourselves who have this agreement and arrangement, and we've opened up the Keren Hishtalmut for them. And as far as the tax authorities are concerned, as far as the accountant is concerned, and as far as the payslip is concerned, it will look like a regular employer-employee contribution into a Keren Hishtalmut. However, the base salary will be reduced to accommodate the employer's contributions.
So here we're basically saying that employees have, they don't always have the decision if they're going to have a Keren Hishtalmut. The employer will decide. Sometimes they can do this situation, but generally, if your employer doesn't offer it, you probably won't have it. But self-employed people, you can go back to that. Self-employed people can do this themselves, and therefore they're not reliant on an employer. And absolutely.
So yes, that's what I'm going to. So I look at the self-employed. So with the self-employed people, so firstly, all the contributions are on them. There's no one else contributing it. So the atzmai, or the atzma'it, the freelancer, they for themselves will decide whether or not they want to pay into this. Now, there is an additional benefit for atzma'im. There is what I like to call a double tax benefit. So what is the double tax benefit? The first benefit, like a regular person, firstly, there is no capital gains tax to pay on any of the profits. And again, usually that's 25%, which they're saving. Once the fund is liquid, i.e. in most cases, once the fund is 6 years old. So just to explain, because a lot of people get confused. Let's say someone opens up a fund today. So, or let's say they open up on the 1st of December, 2021. So come the end of December, 2027, there are technically, sometimes you can get it a bit earlier, but let's say 6 years after that. So we're going to the end of December, 2027. The entire fund becomes liquid, meaning that you can then take the money out without any penalties and without any taxation on the profits. If you take the money out beforehand, then there will be a tax penalty, in essence, to account for the tax benefits that one got. You could be charged at 35, 40% tax on that, so it's not usually recommended to take it out beforehand. But that's the first benefit, is that it's a savings vehicle that they can save into, tax-free. Also, in that example where they started the fund 1st December 2021 and it becomes liquid in December 2027, even money that went in November 2027, one month before it became liquid, the whole fund becomes, it's like you're putting money into this fund. Doesn't matter, you just put in just before the end more money. It's once the fund was opened and the whole fund, the whole cup in essence, becomes exempt from taxation. So it's not each money you have to wait six years. Another question often comes up, do I have to take it out after 6 years? The answer is no. The longer you keep it, it's not locked in for another 6 years. In essence, the fund just becomes, it's like you've taken the lid off, and then you have the ability to take out. Once you take out, you can no longer contribute any more into it. That's a small technicality, and then you'd have to open a new one. But in essence, this is a tax benefit where you can put money in and save money without having to pay any tax on the profits if you wait at least 6 years before you take it out. Now, for this tax,
I find, Danny, that people tend to think that like, oh, it's 6 years, I must take it out and do something. And it's like, no, it's 6 years, so you're allowed to open it. That's very different than you have to open it. Because
in
very
fact, it's
often,
financially smarter to leave it. It's definitely smarter to leave it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not being taxed on the capital gains. So if you go and say, okay, well, I could actually, put it in a stock portfolio or something, unless your stock portfolio does way better than a Keren Hishtalmut, for the average person, it probably isn't going to do better than a Keren Hishtalmut. And here you have this, 25% capital gains that you don't pay. So yeah, very, very often it's worth keeping the Keren Hishtalmut and leaving it long term and not touching it.
So yeah, I'll give you an example. So I've got a client wherein they had a small fund in a place of work around 2,000. They only worked for like half a year. They had about 4,000 shekel overall went into the fund. Fast forward 10 years, 9 years to 2009, 2010, they forgot about this fund and it was just lying dormant. But with compound interest, it was in quite an aggressive fund and did quite well. It had gone up to about 8,000 shekel. That fund is still there today. And without touching it, they say, we don't need it, we'll just leave it there. They can access it any time. But that fund now in 2021 is at 22,500 shekel. So in 22 years, just by sitting there and compounding, it's gone from 4,500 shekel in the space of 22 years to, without any extra money being paid into it, it's grown tax-free to 22,500 shekels. They now have an additional 18,000 shekel in that fund. Whereas, firstly, they wouldn't get that kind of growth in other vehicles necessarily. And if they did, 25% of it would be taxed. So of that 18,000 profit, they would only, there's 4,500 shekel would be taken off. So by keeping it there for longer, if you can do, it's definitely worthwhile. And there are other options which we'll look at about taking loans against it, but I won't, that is in a few slides' time. But the maximum one can pay as an atzmai in the 2021 tax year is a total of 18,480 shekel.
I want to add that we're doing this now, meaning Danny and I arranged to do this now before the end of November, so that anyone who's self-employed, whether it's Moshe or Patur, we wanted to give you the time to do this before the end of the year, so you could squeeze in this tax year, the tax benefit for this year, and do it now. I know, and Danny, I'm sure knows this, that the insurance agents who are licensed to do this get very, very busy towards the end of the year because everyone suddenly remembers, oh, I need to deposit. So we're doing it now so that you have time to deal with it today, tomorrow, next week, and not wait till 31st of December. I remember when I worked in the bank and we used to open Keren Hishtalmut for people at the bank in those days. The 31st of December was the most insane day ever. We signed hundreds of forms. Don't do that. Don't do that to your agent. Don't do that to yourself. We're doing it now at the end of November.
Just that, though. The money has to clear as well. And not everyone's, and we've had instances where people wait right till the end. Or if they're, let's say, working overseas, or they've got money they need to transfer from overseas, the money has to clear and get into the account before the end of the tax year. And this year, we've lost a day. Why? Because the 31st of December is a Friday this year. So it's the 30th. So the tax year, in essence, has been shortened. The advice would be, use Hanukkah as, this year Hanukkah fortunately is early. So Hanukkah is like the first week of December. So use Hanukkah as the cutoff. If anyone who's an atzmai who's thinking about doing it hasn't done it, speak to your agent, sort this out. Speak to your accountant to make sure you're putting what you can or should be doing to maximize. This is an incredible vehicle for tax benefits, but do not wait till the last week or so. Already, I can say for myself, we're already in busy season, and we're just still in November. And it gets manic. It gets really manic at the end of for accountants and for agents. So look at it now. This is again one of the reasons, Rivka, as you mentioned, why when we spoke about when to do it, we said, well, let's do it. We were thinking, do we do it in January? And we said, no, Dav could do it now. So for those who are watching who aren't atzmaim, now's the time to be looking into this.
Absolutely. Danny, we have a few questions that I want to address. First of all, someone's asking if it has to be a monthly installment as an עצמאי or a lump sum. So I'm answering it can be a lump sum. It does not need to be monthly. From a financial...
It can be a combination. One second. Can I just add on?
Sorry?
So I wanted to add to that. You can do both. Now, some people, let's say, well, I want to put 18. People who leave to the end of the year suddenly have to find this 18,000. For cash flow purposes, you may say, well, I can afford, let's say, 500 or 1,000, let's say 1,000 shekel a month. So if you're paying 1,000 shekel a month, you get to the end of the tax year, you've already paid in 12. You only then have to find another 6,000. I say only, but like you have to find another 6,480 shekel. Or some people the other way. If you have all the money at the beginning of the year, January, you can pay it all at the beginning of the year, and then you've kind of got another 12 months of growth on it as well, which is tax-free growth. So it'll be based on the individual, but it's a very, for an עצמאי, it's a very, I guess, malleable product where you can either do on an ad hoc basis, give different times of the year. If someone's, let's say, working seasonal work, let's say someone who sells matzot at Pesach, sells mishloach manot at Purim, and sells lulav and etrog at Sukkot, and sells like dreidels and Hanukkah. So they may have different times of year where they suddenly got extra cash. So they say, well, each time I want to pay in 4,000 shekel after I've got the cash in. You can do it as well. For an עצמאי, the tax year is 1st of January to December 31st. You can do any combination of the two. It's very very flexible. Sorry, Rivka, but yeah, over to you.
Oh, that's great. That's a great answer. That really helps people. I'm also being asked if someone's self-employed and they're employed, sachir and עצמאי, which sometimes comes up. Do they have the same limit? What's the story with Keren Hishtalmut in that case? Okay,
so I won't go too much into it because it depends on how much they're paying in as an עצמאי, and I will, because again, this is supposed to be a basic overview, but in essence, there are upper limits and they can pay into both. However, they may not necessarily get all the tax benefits because they will look at how much they're paying in as a sachir, what the upper limit is of, up to the 15,712 shekels. So that's 1,571 times 12. And then they will look at differentials. So in theory, you can definitely do as both, but the tax benefit of it then may reduce. Again, it's, what I tend to do with people who are in that situation, it becomes a three-way conversation, either a meeting, a Zoom, or an email chain between the עצמאי, the accountant, and myself as the agent, where we will then look at all the figures and then see what's the optimum, what one can do. But there are definitely possibilities to have two funds, one as a sachir and one as an עצמאי. But I won't go too much into these because I will lose probably 95% of the people here by going too technical, and that's not the purpose of it. But yes, it can be done. Each person should look at their specific contribution levels as a sachir and עצמאי, together with their accountant and with their insurance professional or Keren Hishtalmut professional, who will be able to then guide specifically what can or should be done.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on that, or shall I?
I think that's it. Someone's asking, as an עצמאי, can you only have one Keren Hishtalmut? Okay,
so I will. I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to write that down because I'll come back to that. Okay. Once I will one. So I will remind me that I will come back to that, but because when we look at the different types of tracks, that in essence, the answer is yes, you can have more than one. But I will cover that a bit later. The second tax benefit for an עצמאי is that what they pay in, some of it is tax deductible. Now, for this tax year for 2021, income up to 264,000 shekel in 2021, the first 4.5% of that is a tax deductible expense. So if we look at the maximum, you can still pay 18,480 shekel. Can be paid in. I've got three examples which I'll show just so people can see real figures. So one can pay in 18,480, and once they take the fund out, sometime after 6 years, anytime after that, even 20, 30 years down the road, that money up to that figure is exempt of capital gains tax. 4.5% is a tax deductible expense. So up to, so if someone's at the maximum is earning 264,000, 11,880 shekel can be offset against tax, and that is at their tax bracket. So I'll go straight into some examples. Example number one, let's take someone who's earning 150,000 shekel in the year, and they're in the tax bracket of 20%. So again, they can pay the full 18,480 shekel, even if someone's actually earning only 2,000 shekel a year and has a very small file, and they can also do it. So you might have, let's say, a husband and wife, where let's say the wife may be the breadwinner and the husband's only earning 2,000 shekel as an atzma'i and hasn't opened up one. So you can use the husband's file and get that benefit and use that vehicle. So anyone can do the full 18,480. So that's the first thing. The tax rebate, so we look at 4.5% of 200,000, which is 9,000 shekel. So that is considered something where they can get a tax rebate on it. Sorry, I skipped to that. Sorry, 4.5% of 150,000 shekel is 6,750 shekel. So they can, of that 18,480, 4.5% of their income of 150,000, 6,750 shekel is a tax deductible expense. The tax rebate that they would get is 20%, their tax bracket of 6,750 shekel. So they would basically have 1,350 shekel off their tax bill, or if they've already paid the tax, they get that money back. So that's also an immediate growth. That's if we do it as you'll have to do the math quickly. 8% or so of 18,480, if they put the whole amount in, that's an initial growth as well because they've saved tax. So that's example one. Example two, let's look at someone's earning 200,000 shekel. They're in the 31% tax bracket. Again, they can pay the full 18,480 shekel to benefit from the capital gains tax exemption. But the tax rebate, we then look at 4.5% of 200,000 shekel, which is 9,000 shekel. They're in the 31%. Oh, saying that something's gone wrong here. That's an error. That should be 9,000 shekel instead of that. Just because it's going to go live, I'm going to quickly change that very quickly online. That should be 9,000 shekel. You see, real time. Okay, so apologies for that. So you take 31%. Let me just check that the math is correct, and it didn't get corrupted. So 9,000 shekel times 31%. Yep, so the figure's correct. So they've saved 2,790 shekel. That's the tax rebate in this example. Example number three, someone's earning 300,000 shekel. They're in the 35% income tax bracket. They're above the maximum limit, which we mentioned, of 264,000 shekel. So again, they can still pay the 18,480, but they only get the rebate on 4.5% of the maximum limit, which is 11,880 shekel. Take 35% of that contribution, which is a 4,158 shekel rebate. So we're seeing the double tax benefit. So if I go back, when I say it's a double tax benefit, an atzma'i benefits from no tax to pay on the profits, plus they get a tax rebate on their what they're paying in on their contribution. Now, obviously, someone who's, let's say, earning very little amount of money and is not paying much income tax, so they may not get this benefit. It may reduce very, very, very slightly what they pay to Bituach Leumi, but the benefit of the first one is still of no capital gain tax, still makes it definitely worthwhile. So those are examples for atzmaim. Now, another question people always say, I want to take it out. I need to take it out. Why? Because I'm making a bar mitzvah, or I want to buy, we need to buy a car. Our car's broken down. Now, a lot of funds, not all funds, but a lot of funds will allow you to take a loan against it. And usually these are quite reasonable rates. And the advice is, obviously, first and foremost, check if the company offering does offer a loan, number one. Number two, can you afford the monthly repayments? If you're someone who can, it may often make sense to not liquidate the fund, but to keep it growing. And historically, obviously, past performance doesn't guarantee future ones, but historically, they make far more than what you're going to be paying in the loan. So loan examples, I've just looked at two companies, Ultra Shacham and Klal. So the length of loan that they have available is up to 7 years. Different companies have different minimums. So their minimum loan is 20,000 with Altschüler. For Klal, it's 10,000. The maximum for Altschüler is 500,600. However, how much can you take on it? So if, let's say, for example, your fund's already liquid, so Altschüler at the moment will only allow you to take up to 65%. So if you've got 100,000 shekels sitting in your fund and it's over 6 years old, you can take up to 65,000 shekel. With Klal, they'll allow you to take up to 80,000 unless it's in the S&P 500 track. So there, they'll only let you take up to 50% because they're concerned if there are financial crashes and your equity goes down. So there are different limitations. Different companies have different rules. Now, the examples of what they will actually charge. So Altschüler Shacham at the moment will charge you the prime rate. So as of today, prime is 1.6%. That can go up, but you're in essence borrowing money at 1.6%. Historically, we'll soon see that these funds will average 5, 6, 7% return. So you're basically borrowing the money at 1.6%, and it's growing and compounding at 6 or 7%. So it's almost free money if you can afford to pay make your repayments. Klal have 3 different options. Either the prime rate, or they will say take 2%, but it's going to be linked samud madad to the consumer's price index. So each month, as the madad increases, the 2% will increase. Or they'll say we'll give you 2.75% fixed rate, which is a relatively decent rate. If you're to go banks to look to borrow, the reason why they tend to give these low rates because they know you've got equity there, you're good for the money. So it's kind of a security should someone be in a situation where they unfortunately have to default on the payments, so that it's a lower risk loan. Now, some companies will allow you to take, if a fund's is not liquid, also to take some loans out, but the percentages with different companies may be the same, may be lower. Each company has their own rules. There are so many different companies and tracks. So I just gave 2 examples just to help people understand. But in essence, someone who feels this is relevant, again, check with your company or your agent to get specific information. Now, when we spoke about Rivka, you mentioned you don't have to take it out after 6 years. So I've looked at compound interest. This is similar to those who saw the pension graph, very similar graph where over time it goes higher and higher. But I've taken 5 different terms of the 6 years. So someone let's say someone who's paying 1,000 shekel a month into their fund. So after 6 years, they have 72,000 shekel they've paid in. After 12, it's 144, 216. After 30 years, they've paid 360,000. And if it's compounding at 4, 5, 6, or 8%, you see how it grows over time. Now, clearly, someone who's paid over 30 years, you're seeing the jump from 72 after 6 years has only jumped by about 10 to 20,000, depending on the interest rates, between 4 and 8%. After 30 years, we go to the other extreme, which a lot of people actually do keep it in for that long. So 360,000, it's doubling or trebling or even more, depending on the interest rates. It's a much, much greater growth. Now, what I wanted to show is someone taking a loan. So I've got the same graph here. On the right-hand side, I've taken someone taking a loan, let's say for 6 years, and someone taking a 50,000 shekel loan or 100,000 shekel loan. And I've looked at either 2 or 3% interest. Why? Because if we go back, we saw 1.6, 2, or even fixed at 2.75. So 2 to 3% is a reasonable estimate. Now, if someone's taking a 50,000 shekel loan or 100,000 shekel loan, what will be the repayments each month for the 6 years to pay it off? So for 50,000, you're looking at approximately 750 shekel a month, and approximately 1,500 shekel a month to repay a loan of 100,000 shekel through a Keren Hishtalmut over 6 years. So that's what it would cost. How much extra have you paid on top of the 50,000 or the 100,000 in that time if you've paid it at 2 or 3%? So between 3 and 4,500, give or take, and between 6 and 9,500 shekel over 100,000 shekel. So if someone is taking their fund out every 6 years, so let's jump to let's go through 5-year cycles, the most extreme. So if we're only at 4% interest, so 80,000 times 5, my mathematics says it's about 400,000 shekel. There's an additional 294,000 shekel by someone keeping that, and if they can afford the loans, where each time they would have paid, if they've taken a 50,000 shekel loan, instead of taking it out each time, then they would have been paying, call it, even if we're to increase it to 5,000. So they've paid 25,000 shekel in interest over this period of time, but they've got almost an additional 300,000 shekel or 270,000 shekel interest-free, tax-free in their fund. So I know this is a lot of figures, not everyone can follow it. So maybe Rivka, maybe you want to add something, or if this is not, if I haven't made it as clear as possible, but just to show that, for those who can afford, and I stress can afford, because don't take loans if you can't afford it. Some people need to take the cash out, so take it out. But for those who can afford to keep it going for longer and can afford to take these loans, it definitely makes sense, instead of getting every 6 years 80,000 and 80,000 each time, times that by 5, or even at 8%. So you've got 450,000 over the time, and you've basically got an extra million shekel at 8% growth, instead of paying back, between like 25 and 50,000 shekel over that time by constantly doing the loans every 6 years instead. So you have anything to add on that, Rivka?
I think it was fairly clear. I think the numbers really speak for themselves. I mean, anyone looking at this going, okay, my fund, let's say it does an average of 8%, which is totally reasonable. And we'll take a look at the, how the funds have done. If I just leave it and don't pull it, it's like a tree growing. You pull it out each time. No, we just let it grow, It can grow to tremendous amounts. I mean, 30 years is like, on the one hand, it's like, wow, a lot to think about. On the other hand, anyone listening who's 35 has 30 years before they're going to retire. They could have 1.49 million shekel potentially. Obviously, we don't know what's going to be in the future. Just by sticking to it, keeping it in, and that's only with 1,000 shekel a month deposit. Many people do the full, the maximum, which is more than that, as we discussed. I think the numbers really speak for themselves. Very, very powerful. Very, it makes sense in many, many cases. Obviously, not every. To keep your money in a Keren Hishtalmut and let it grow tax-free. And if you need money, take a loan against it, because it's one of the cheapest loans you can find.
Okay, so let's look at the interest rate, because we said, what's reasonable. So again, I've used, like with the pension talk, Gemelnet. So this is where we can see different funds. Amongst them is Keren Hishtalmut. So when you go into Gemelnet, it's a government site, .gov.co.il. And
we'll share the link. We will share the link.
Yeah, and so you go to Knisa L'Ma'arechet, and it takes you to here. You can then search either all the Keren Hishtalmut and move it into the box on the left, or you can do by individual funds. I've looked at one company, because they've got it's been going for many years. So I've looked at Migdal. So I've taken 3 of their different funds: a general fund, which is a mixed exposure, a conservative fund, which has nothing in the stock market, primarily almost all of it in Israeli government bonds, and their aggressive fund, which is a much higher exposure to the stock market. So over the last 12 months, we're seeing that the higher one has made 30.5%, just under 1.2% in the low risk, and the middle one about 17%. Obviously, we're in a post COVID vaccine world where the markets have recovered. So we're currently in a very big recovery at the moment, though. So I don't expect these figures to maintain themselves. But if we look at a 5-year average, which includes the dips of Corona as well, and of a couple of years ago where there's a small dip as well, so they're averaging 11% per annum over 5 years, 2% in the very conservative one, and the mixed one 6.64%. If we look at all the Keren Hishtalmut in Israel, so they're averaging 6.27% over 5 years. Then we look at the different funds, just so you can we looked at this briefly in the pension talk, but the mixed fund, what are they looking at? So you can see each year from 2009 to 2020 how they've invested. So the bottom arrow is showing what's been in the stock market. It's approximately a third is invested in the stock market. And we're seeing about, in 2009, it was just under 30%. Last year, 11% in government bonds. But we're seeing things in all different things, like in loans. It could be that they have things in cash, in corporate bonds, in Kronot Ne'emanut, or in properties and things like that. But it's a mixed portfolio. Their aggressive fund, you'll see the stock market jumps 80%, 90%. The last couple of years, they're a bit lower because they're a bit cautious of the impact of COVID. They went down to 65 in 2019 and 2020 to 76%, gradually building up. But it's a much higher level, and the government bonds was zero, except for the last couple of years where they put a bit more to protect some of the money, but it's a much more aggressive fund in terms of exposure to the stock market. And then we have their conservative one, which is nothing in the stock market, zeros across the board by the bottom arrow, and the top arrow, which is the government bonds, well over 90%, and they keep a bit in cash. If we go back, let's say 16 years, and we check year by year, again, you'll see the difference. So in the middle is the aggressive funds. So the financial crash of 2008 is where they lost much more, 51%. The mixed one lost 9%. Ironically, the Israeli government bond, because Israel bucked the worldwide subprime trend, and everyone was investing in the Israeli government and Israeli market, it was actually their best return and their only double-figure return. But then you look at the recovery, 5%, 72% almost, and over 25% in 2009. But you're seeing bigger gains potential here and bigger losses potential. So someone who's getting close, or someone who's not necessarily into high risk, I wouldn't advise it. Or someone, let's say, is within a couple of years or so wanting to take the money out, to maybe go more conservative, you can switch funds or tracks at any given time, so it's not a problem. Now, people say, but does it even out? So here we look at different periods of time. So looking over the last year, this is what we saw before, the differences. But if we go, let's say 6 years, from 15 to 21, which basically takes into consideration the 6 years when someone could initially take out the fund. So we're seeing, even with the impact of COVID, it's made 42% the mixed fund in that 6 years, 13.5% in the government bond one, and 77% is what the fund has made in the aggressive fund. If we go back in time, 11 years, or let's even go back 16 years, which includes the financial crash and the big losses of 2008, it's still coming on top. And obviously, if someone was unlucky enough to need the money in 2008, they would have been down. But it's definitely a product that the longer you wait, you can definitely make more money. And we're seeing the money has made more than 200% growth over a 16-year period, as opposed to 167%, and almost 98% in the government bonds. So historically, and again, past performance doesn't guarantee future performances, but if it's for a long haul, some people can afford to be more aggressive. And as they get older, nearer to retirement age, or nearer to a time when they would need to take the money out, so you can go more conservative to protect the money against any potential, hopefully hypothetical, financial crash. The next question people always ask about the fees. So there are two different fees on products with all financial products like pension and Keren Hishtalmut. One is from the money going in. So let's say you're paying 1,000 shekel a month, how much do they take? And one's from the overall fund, B, from the mitzvah chisachon, from the accumulation. It's very simple. The maximum fees, they don't take any fees from the money going in. They can take 2% per annum from accumulation. What's the common average fees? Again, you'll see people with higher and some people with lower. Again, 0 from the money going in. But if you're in the 0.7 to 1% range, you're in a good place. If you've got lower than 0.7, you've got a very good fee. If you've got higher than 1%, and often this is with people with funds from 20 years ago or 15 years ago, where 1.2, 1.4 was good there. We're now in a much more competitive market. If you've got one of these older funds with a higher fee, now's the time to look at understanding this and to renegotiate the fees or move it to another fund with lower fees. How to read your documents. So this is something which I took off a website, and then for an employee, whereby you get your annual statement and it will say which year it is here. And it shows you each month when the money was paid in. This is for a sachir, for an employed person, which month it would have been for. And we see this person here was earning about 4,800, and you'll see the 2.5% and 7.5%. So on a salary of 4,806, 481 shekel was going in that month. And we see what was going in here. At the bottom, you'll see the details of the agent. And then we see in each report the opening balance, how much was paid in the year, how much profit it made, what was taken in fees. So this is something I've posted because it's not one of my clients. So I've taken something which will show high fee. This is obviously something where they're paying 1.48%, and it says the average one on this fund is 0.9. So it even tells you what the average fee is. So definitely, if you see this, that's where to look to see if you're paying a high fee. This is someone who happened to be in a masul halacha. They wanted an extra halachic fund where the return in this year, I think this was 2019, even though they've looked it up, I can see from the return, this is a 2019, and they made 4.67%. For Atzmaim, these are a couple of things which I've deleted out information of people. This is someone who was Atzma'i, paid a lump sum at the end of 2018, and then said, I want to pay monthly. So you're seeing what Rivka, you asked the question, can you pay lump sum or monthly? This is someone who paid a lump sum here and paid each month 1,000 shekel. Then they changed jobs and they went to become a sachir, so they could no longer contribute as Atzma'i. So they stopped paying here. So they paid a total, each month in this tax year of 20,000, 8,000 went in plus 12. But we're seeing the opening balance, what was paid in, the profits. And here we see the fees, 0.99%, and their return in 2019, and the average fund was 15.26. On the second page, you then get the Ishur Mas, which a lot of us will say, well, how do I know what I've paid in for this tax year to give to the accountant to get the tax benefit? And you'll see, you have the Ishur Mas Lahatzarat Hon, where I have the person's details, and it'll say how much is in the overall fund, 44,150, and that is what you show for your Hatzarat Hon, for someone who needs to get the tax rebate. This is 2019. So it says here, this is what was paid in the tax year of 2019, and 8,000 shekel. That accounts for January through to August, 1,000 shekel each month. And this would be given to the accountant, and then the accountant will be able to claim the tax back. This is a different example. This is an interesting one I want to show because people may have Halman Al Dobby, which is now, since in the last few months, merged with Excellence Phoenix. This is someone who originally had with IBI. IBI was an investment house that opened up in 1971, was merged a few years ago with Halman Al Dobby. So this is someone who we're seeing in 2019. They paid right at the end of 2018, 13,440. In 2019, at the end of the tax year, they paid 12,480 based on what was recommended for them. This is someone who's in an S&P track. They made in 2019 20.31%. Their fees, the average is 0.76. We managed to negotiate, it had 0.5%, so much lower here. And we're seeing the opening balance was zero. Why? Because it was previously with IBI, and they have merged it over to this fund. So what went in was 25,920. So they allocated the previous tax year's money from IBI to that. There was profits of 5,270, and they also moved over from a previous fund, from the old IBI fund, 13,000, and the management fees was 154 shekel, but it's grown up to 44,647 shekel. And we see again, the Hatzarat Hon will say how much is in the overall fund, is that figure. And for the tax benefits, what they paid in 2019, this would be given to the accountant, the Ishur Mas, showing the figure here, and that will be given to the accountant to get a tax rebate. So I'll sum things up, and then we'll open up for any questions. But first and foremost, take ownership, understand the type of funds that you have, both in terms of what you're paying in, which company, what the fees are, what the track are. So again, check the track. Does it match your age, your family status, and income levels? When do you need to take it out? Check the fees, as I mentioned. If you're self-employed, speak to your accountant and your agent and look into the following: optimizing the amounts before the end of the tax year to get the benefits. If you wait until the end of December, it may be that you've made the transfer, but if the money hasn't hit the account and cleared the account of the company where your fund is, then you won't get the tax benefit for this year. And review 2022 payments. Maybe consider then setting up a horat keva, a monthly amount, or even to pay the entire amount at the beginning of the year if you can afford that as well, to get the benefit of the growth there. And before withdrawing money, consider that whether or not it makes sense to take a loan. Again, only if you can afford the repayments. Because if you can't afford it, you don't want to get yourself into a spiral where you're just plunging further into debt by taking another loan. But if you can afford the repayments, it can tremendously, as we showed before, enhance the compound interest that you can have on the fund. That, in essence, is unless you've got questions, I guess we'll open it up, or anything that's come into. I can see one question's come from someone. are there loan options against a fund that is less than 6 years old? That's been asked. So depends on the company. Some will allow, but again, if the minimum loan is, let's say, 10,000 shekel, and let's say they would only allow you to take maybe 50%, you'll have to have at least 20,000 shekel in the fund to be able to take a loan. But not all companies offer it. Some do, some don't. Any other questions you're seeing?
Okay, we'll allow a few minutes if anyone has questions. We'll also answer questions afterwards on the Facebook group, so feel free to ask. My tip right now, I mean, sort of was in your summary, but just as an action item, anyone who already has a Keren Hishtalmut, new or old, go to the company's website now. Let's say it's Harel, Altruler, doesn't matter, Migdal, wherever it is. Go to their website, put in your cell phone number, to that number I think it is. They'll send you a code. Log in, you have all this information fresh in your mind, see what your fees are, see what, see how it's done, see what track you're in. And now that you have all this information, and do it today, take a look today to understand what you have.
So Rivka, someone's posted they have a question about, but whilst you look for that question, so there was a question which I didn't touch with, so I'll come back to. Someone asked, can you have more than one Keren Hishtalmut? So quite often, this is the same with Kupat Gimel Ashkan and other investment strategies as well. Some people may say, well, I want to spread the risk, both between companies. So let's say an Atzma'i can pay 18,480 shekel. So actually, yesterday for someone, they said, well, I want to spread the risk. I'm not sure about the markets. So we've opened one with, let's say, 9,240 shekel in an aggressive fund with one company. And in a mixed fund, we open with a different company to spread this, not put all eggs in one basket. So you're not having all with the same company. You can have it with the same company as well. But this person decided, let's split between two different companies and two different risks. As long as you're not going above the 18,480 shekel, that's not a problem. And some people may actually decide, do I go S&P 500? Do I go aggressive? Right? The markets are really high at the moment. Do I actually, think it's going to come down in a second? Do I want to hedge my bets? There are so many different options. But yes, to answer that question, you can have more than one. And obviously, each one would have its own Ishur Mas, which you then give at the end of the year. The Ishurim tend to come out right at the very end of March, beginning of April. Again, depending on when Pesach falls, also may impact when it comes out. And that's when you can log into your personal zone as well. Download your Ishur Mas, give that to your accountant, and they can get the tax benefits. So if you've got more than one, so you've done, let's say, 4. You've done about 4,500 shekel in 4 different funds. So you'll have 4 different reports and 4 different insurance to then give to your accountant, and they will submit that to get the tax benefit. So yes, to answer that question, bearing in mind now that we've seen the different types of funds and the levels of potential risk, potential growth, potential losses in adverse economic climates. So some people may decide that for themselves, they want to spread the risk and open more than one. So that answers that question.
Amazing. Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so we do need to wrap up. The 2 questions that we just got in is, what would be your first step if you don't have a Keren Hishtalmut? Is it an agent? The answer is yes. You go to your agent, I guess, right?
Again, look, if someone knows what to do and they exactly understands all the markets, you can go directly. Some instances you may get a lower fee, some instances not. The one I showed before of the Halman Al-Dobi, the person went directly to Halman Al-Dobi and they were offered like 0.1% more than we got. Different agents will have different agreements, different things. It's not always the case. But if you've got an agent also who's seeing your overall thing, if you're happy with your agent, they can do it and they know your overall portfolio. Because if you speak to a moked, also you're dealing with, you've got to make the decisions and you're speaking to a different person each time. It depends on each person. If you've got the financial know-how and you know how to do it, so fine, you can do it yourself as well. But if you want the ease, also the submitting the forms, all the questions and the guidance, it doesn't always cost you more. Often it might be the same. Often it might even be cheaper. But if someone who doesn't really understand it, then I would definitely, I know kind of noger b'davar because I am an agent. But being an agent who does not work on commissions, I work on a salary only, so I don't get any extra income by doing these products. So I would definitely advise people who are still not sure what to do. Then you should speak to an agent. But people who feel comfortable themselves, b'vakasha.
Okay. And someone's asking if they move their Keren Hishtalmut, from one fund to another, does the 6 years restart? And the answer is no. The 6
No.
years is from the day they originally opened the first fund.
It's called VETEC. It's called VETEC as the term. You maintain the original VETEC, and it's important to check that. But it should maintain the original VETEC if you move it from one to another.
Great. Okay, Danny, thank you so much. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for joining, for making your lives financially smarter. We're here. We'll be on the group. So if anyone has any further questions, we will answer. Have a great day, everyone.